Sandy and Mandy Bentley were two of the most iconic it girls of the late 90s, early 2000s. They were twins dating Hugh Hefner during his first public multiple girlfriends phase. After separating from his wife, Kimberly Conrad, Hugh Hefner's public image and the image of the Playboy brand was massively rehabbed in the American mind through his dating multiple women at the same time. And the gimmick of dating twins, Sandy and Mandy Bentley, really made quite a splash in the public eye. My name is Laura. Welcome back to the Women of Playboy series. I'm so excited to be getting back into it. I think I'll also release this episode as an audio on my podcast feed. My show is called Characters because this is a really good one, so maybe you want to take it on the go. Sandy and Mandy Bentley are originally from Joliet, Illinois, and it's understood that the women grew up in a relatively conservative household. There was a lot of restrictions on what they were allowed to do and wear and watch. The sisters go their separate ways for college. Mandy stays in Illinois, and Sandy eventually attends UNLV. While Sandy is living in Las Vegas attending college, she has a boyfriend who is a pro tennis player. He encourages Sandy to get into modeling. Now, the story of Sandy and Mandy Bentley and the crime attached to their name is a subject of the Playboy murders. Their episode is called Double Trouble, and this boyfriend, this former now pro tennis star who encouraged Sandy to get into modeling, is featured as a speaker on that episode. Mandy makes a trip to visit her sister Sandy in Las Vegas, and the girls take a road trip to Los Angeles. And it sounds like this road trip was really taken on the tip by this boyfriend that the women should consider modeling. Now, during this little trip to Los Angeles, Sandy and Mandy Bentley go to the Garden of Eden nightclub. This was the place to see and be seen, and this is also a well-known, established kind of hunting ground for Hugh Hefner at the time. A lot of women that we hear about associated with Hugh Hefner, especially in the early 2000s, met him at the Garden of Eden. And actually, it's said that the Bentley twins were introduced to Hugh Hefner by Heather Kozar, who was Playmate of the Year in 1999. It seems like the story goes that the Bentley twins met Hugh Hefner at this nightclub. They kind of hit it off, but then it was time for them to go home. Remember, they're on a trip. Sandy goes back to school in Las Vegas at UNLV. Mandy goes home to Illinois. And both of them, Sandy and Mandy Bentley, living in different cities, got a call from Hugh Hefner the summer of 1998. And they both, of course, thought it was a joke. They couldn't believe it. This story is told in their interview with Playboy for their May 2000 cover. This article is titled Double Trouble, which is also the name of the Playboy Murders episode about them. Anyway, Sandy gets the call from Hugh Hefner first. She calls her sister Mandy, and she's like, "You're never going to believe who called me." And sure enough, Mandy didn't believe her either. Quote, "Sandy said, 'You'll never believe who's on the phone,' says Mandy. 'When she said Hugh Hefner, I said, sure, and I'm the Queen of England.'" Now, at this point in time, Sandy and Mandy Bentley do not immediately become girlfriends. It seems to me like they move to Los Angeles and they start just spending more time at the Playboy Mansion. They start attending parties. And eventually they do become girlfriends during the Brandy Roderick era. Brandy was there first. I'm not sure how quickly after the Bentley twins joined, but it seems like it was a pretty short period of time where Brandy was the only girlfriend of Hugh Hefner. And during this time when the twins are dating Hugh Hefner, they really leaned into the twin bit. I definitely feel like it's a gimmick, this old man dating twins 50 years younger than him at the same time, in addition to one other main girlfriend. And actually one other girl after that, Jessica Paisley, but we'll talk about her in a second. And I kind of feel like Sandy and Mandy Bentley were in on the gimmick because it seems like they really embraced it. Sandy and Mandy Bentley, from my perspective, were kind of like Barbie dolls. They were always dressed exactly the same. They weren't just matchy-matchy. They weren't like Destiny's Child. They weren't like Mary-Kate and Ashley. They were always dressed exactly the same. Their hair was done the same way. Their makeup was the same. Their makeup was always fabulous. And they really were such it girls. And even if we're thinking about this wider relationship, if we could zoom in just on Sandy and Mandy, part of the way they dressed and the way they were always matching and the way they moved around even in interviews, I feel really leaned into the bit for their own sake. They were it girls. Sandy and Mandy Bentley dated Hugh Hefner for maybe 2 years. Between 1999 and 2000, they were on the cover of Playboy May of 2000, and they left shortly afterwards. Brandy Roderick was on the cover April of 2000. So definitely at this time, the brand is really leaning into the multiple girlfriends bit, really highlighting the women in Hugh Hefner's life. In promotion of their May 2000 cover, the Bentley twins and Hugh Hefner took a trip to New York City. This was clearly a very busy day because they're in the same outfits throughout different events. They're both in black outfits with black cowboy hats, and the cowboy hats have little rhinestones on them. There's pictures of them opening the New York Stock Exchange. There's pictures of them doing an in-store signing of their magazine. And in these same outfits, they also do an interview with Jon Stewart. This interview with Jon Stewart is available deep on comedycentral.com still. This interview is kind of a gross watch. And I say that because I feel like it really leans into the misogynistic mentality of the late 90s, early 2000s. A very casual, joking glorification. And I definitely feel like everyone involved in this interview is leaning into how gimmicky the relationship is. I feel like I've said gimmicky a couple of times now. And what I mean by that is like, I feel like these girls knew that it was kind of a bit. And Hugh Hefner definitely knew, and the Playboy brand definitely knew. This was a great way to get people talking. At one point, there's a question asked of like how the three of them met. And Sandy makes a joke of like, oh, didn't you hear there's a cloning lab now at the Playboy Mansion? Jon Stewart at one point also makes a weird comment that he asks Hugh Hefner, how do you tell them apart? And then Jon Stewart starts laughing by himself and he's like, I guess it doesn't matter. Or like, who cares? You don't have to tell them apart. Now, thinking about this first group of the multiple girlfriends era, we often just think of Brandy Roderick, Sandy, and Mandy Bentley. I do think part of the gimmick is also that all of their names rhyme. But there was also a fourth woman part of this group for a brief period of time named Jessica Paisley. There's not a lot of information available on Jessica Paisley. She really was not publicized as much, and I do wonder if part of it is like her name did not rhyme with the other ones. But I also think part of it is like she just wasn't there for that long. It's kind of understood that Jessica Paisley was Sandy and Mandy's friend who they wanted to move into the mansion with. Like they weren't willing to move in without her. Now, Jessica Paisley's time in this relationship was brief compared to the Bentley twins. So I don't think the story would have been like they weren't willing to move in without her. But maybe it was like, if we're girlfriends, then we need to have like this friend that's always invited to the club nights or whatever. I'm going to put an asterisk here because we will come back to Jessica Paisley and what is understood about her role in this relationship in a second. Now, shortly after their cover comes out, late summer, early fall of the year 2000, Sandy and Mandy Bentley leave the mansion. And it's understood that the primary reason they were asked to leave, the primary reason they were broken up with, is because Sandy had another boyfriend outside of the relationship. That was a huge no-no throughout like the entire time of the multiple girlfriends era. Really like that entire last 20, 30 years of Hugh Hefner's life. He could date multiple people, but you could not date anyone besides him. Now, at this point in time, Sandy Bentley is dating a man named Mark Yagalla, and her time with Mark Yagalla overlaps with her time with Hugh Hefner. Mark Yagalla actually wrote a book called Wall Street Joyride, which I have not read, but I've read some excerpts of, and then Mark Yagalla himself wrote a blog post that I can link below. It has like an excerpt of the book and then like some further elaborations. When Mark Yagalla meets Sandy Bentley, he is a businessman, a financier. He's living in Las Vegas, and he is making stupid amounts of money. In this book, Mark Yagalla says that he met Sandy in August of 1999, and he was introduced to Sandy by his girlfriend at the time, Playboy's Miss May 1999, Tashara Casino. I believe she is now a real estate agent in Las Vegas, which I talked about the Playmate to real estate agent pipeline in our video about Carmela Garcia. In the opening of this excerpt, Mark Yagalla also says that he previously idolized Hugh Hefner, that he was like so flattered, I guess, to have a girlfriend that Hugh Hefner had also had. And that when he and Sandy Bentley first got together, he just had so many questions about like how her relationship with Hugh Hefner worked. She insisted to Mark Yagalla that it was just for publicity and that she didn't really love him, he didn't really love her. And at first she said that there really was not a lot of physical intimacy, but later it sounds like she did change her answer to Mark Yagalla about the physical intimacy that she was having with Hugh Hefner. Allegedly, she tells Mark Yagalla that like no one really liked to be physically intimate with him. This excerpt honestly is like a little bit explicit. And anyway, at this point in the book is when Mark Yagalla introduces Jessica Paisley. This is what he says about her. Quote, later, Hef had to bring on a fourth girlfriend, Jessica Paisley, because she became the designated hitter for the hot girls like Sandy, Mandy, and Brandy. Jessica was, quote, taking one for the team. So this contradicts a little bit what we're otherwise told about Jessica Paisley. We're told at first that she was a friend of Sandy and Mandy that they wanted around. And then Mark Yagalla says that she was brought in basically to be physically intimate when the other women did not want to be with Hugh Hefner. Mark Yagalla also kind of takes credit for Hugh Hefner imposing curfews and like other rules with his multiple girlfriends. He says that after Hugh Hefner found out about his relationship with Sandy, that's when the 9 p.m. curfew was instated, which I do feel like this is a little bit out of line with what we've heard about the multiple girlfriends era. We typically hear that things just like got more strict over time, and that 9 p.m. curfew wasn't like strictly enforced until much later, like towards the end of the 7 Girlfriends era. Now, I mentioned Mark Yagalla was a financier. He was super wealthy. He was spending a lot of money on his girlfriend. And in this book, Mark Yagalla says that a big reason Sandy Bentley was like swept off her feet to be with him is because he was able to provide so much more than Hugh Hefner was willing to provide. That Hefner was giving her a measly $1,000 a month. And when she started dating Mark Yagalla, she was bumped up to $50,000 a month and then $100,000 a month. Plus, she got her own platinum American Express card with no limit. She was averaging another $100,000 a month on the Amex. Between Sandy, the plane, and the casinos, I was going through a minimum of $1 million a month. He's talking about his own spending. And that Sandy's room service bill typically ran over $1,000 each time she ordered. While Mark Yagalla and Sandy Bentley are together, he is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on her. In addition to this like free reign to his money, he's also buying her gifts. He's buying her a lot of fabulous jewels. He's buying her a home. He's buying her furs. Big spender Mark Yagalla is investigated by the IRS, and he is arrested for conducting a Ponzi scheme. A large portion of the money that Mark Yagalla was spending on Sandy Bentley was embezzled from his clients. While Mark Yagalla is being held, Sandy Bentley starts dating a man by the name of Michael Tardio. Michael Tardio was a part-time model, he was a father, and he worked at the Garden of Eden nightclub, where she and her sister originally met Hugh Hefner. Sandy learns that the IRS and the FBI are coming to her home to seize a lot of the gifts that Mark Yagalla has given her in an attempt to recoup some of the funds. Sandy has her new boyfriend, Michael Tardio, and a friend of his, Christopher Monson, come over to her house in Las Vegas, and they're filling like duffel bags, Louis Vuitton duffel bags full of jewels and furs and just like stuff. Things that they knew would likely be seized. And also, in theory, things that they could sell to make some of their own money. They think they're being slick about this. They're filling these huge duffel bags full of stuff. They're throwing them over her back gate, like through her neighbor's yard, and packing their car. And Michael Tardio and Christopher Monson drive back to Los Angeles. Investigators come the next day and they realize that a lot of the stuff that they were hoping to get was gone. And Sandy Bentley just says that there was a lot that was stolen. Every time this like group of gifts is spoken about, there is a comment made that Sandy Bentley had a replica of the necklace that Julia Roberts wears in Pretty Woman that was estimated to be worth $250,000. That was anticipated to be part of this like set of jewels that was going to be seized. And it said that originally Sandy Bentley did not like pack very much for the men to take back to Los Angeles. And when they got there, they're like, you gotta give us more stuff. Anyway, when she's asked about it, Sandy says like a lot of this has been stolen over time. Fast forward a little bit, Michael Tardio is trying to find a buyer for all of these jewels via his workplace of the Garden of Eden. About a year later, he is connected with a man that we only know as Mr. Big. He had been trying to make the sale for quite some time. There was a local jeweler that could recount meeting with Michael Tardio and like seeing his slip, his appraisals for all of his stuff, and then later seeing the same appraisal slip with someone else, who like now we assume to be Mr. Big. Soon after Michael Tardio is connected with Mr. Big, he and his friend are making the exchange with this person. Later that night, a heavily bulleted and burning vehicle, a Mercedes SUV, is found in a residential area of Studio City, and the bodies are identified as Michael Tardio and Christopher Monson. Sandy does not learn about the murder until she goes to the Garden of Eden nightclub the following day looking for Michael Tardio. She said that she was trying to call him and trying to get a hold of him and he wasn't answering, so she went to his place of work, and when she got there, investigators were like questioning all of the employees. And so she is sat down and she is told what happens. And investigators say it seems like Sandy was truly shocked by this news. Sandy Bentley ends up being offered some sort of deal to aid in this investigation. And the deal is so that she avoids the tax evasion associated with all of those missing jewels. So she cooperates with this murder investigation, and that's when she starts admitting to like how they got the jewels out of her house, how they started looking for a buyer over the last year. And from that point forward, there is very little progress made on this case. No one can identify Mr. Big, not even the employee that connected Mr. Big and Michael Tardio. And actually, that employee that introduced these two parties to that site of what was going to be the exchange, he said that he saw the two cars were there and just drove away, let them do their business. He was briefly investigated because his cell phone did like ping on the towers near the scene. However, it was still like relatively new technology at the time to use cell phone towers to estimate a location. So it sounds like the employee was just kind of freaked out that he was caught in the middle of this, and again, like really insisted that he had no idea who Mr. Big actually was. The general consensus by investigators was that Michael Tardio and Christopher Monson simply lacked street smarts. That whoever it was that they were planning on selling these jewels to was just going to rip them off. To this day, the jewels have never been recovered, and this case is still an open cold case. The cold case was reopened in 2012. It's kind of believed that a lot of these jewels were just like picked apart and sold. There is a little bit of hope that like there may be some serial numbers that they can recover. But again, there really has been like almost no progress since immediately after like that day at the Garden of Eden when they were questioning people. I mentioned that there's a Playboy Murders episode about this case. Of course, Playboy Murders like focuses a little bit more on the women and their connection to the brand. But this portion of the case, the Mark Yagalla Ponzi scheme and the jewel heist and the murder, that's been covered a few times through investigative journalists and of course like true crime sources. So like there was a 48 Hours on it. There's a lot of podcasts on like the crime portion of this story. And usually Sandy Bentley is just referred to as like a Playboy model or like a former playmate. Now, switching gears a little bit, after leaving the mansion, Sandy Bentley definitely is the one who remained in the spotlight because of all of these crimes. Mandy Bentley, we don't know a lot about in those years immediately following leaving the Playboy Mansion. I have to assume that she left because her sister left. Like they were a package deal. One was not going to stay without the other. And it also kind of seems like Sandy was the instigator in like getting them there and getting them to modeling and getting them to date this guy. Mandy comparatively is understood to be like the more reserved one of the two. Hi from the editing room. I want to jump in and give you a little clarification in the form of a timeline. So we understand Sandy and Mandy Bentley to have left the Playboy Mansion around the fall of the year 2000. Michael Tardio and Christopher Monson's murder occurred September of 2002. So all of this happened in about 2 years. The Mark Yagalla Ponzi scheme, Sandy packing up all of her stuff and getting it out of her Las Vegas home and claiming that it was stolen, and then the year of waiting for this buyer, Mr. Big. And around this time at the Playboy Mansion, this is well into the Seven Girlfriends era. Girls Next Door begins airing in 2005. And throughout this time period, like the fall of 2000 through, let's say 2006, Girls Next Door season 2, Sandy and Mandy Bentley are seen professionally. Like there are images of them going to fundraisers, going to magazine launch parties. Their appearance on Sex and the City as Hugh Hefner's girlfriends is aired. They're on an episode of 2.5 Men. So when I say we don't know a lot about Mandy Bentley during this time after leaving the Playboy Mansion, that's specifically referring to her personal life. We, even today, do not know a lot about the personal life of Mandy Bentley. Mandy Bentley is seen on an episode of Girls Next Door. It's season 2. The episode is called Rabbit Season. This episode is the search for bunnies for women to work at the new Playboy Club opening in Las Vegas. It's opening at the Palms, and this is kind of an open casting call. Not really. I think like people had to apply and they were filtered through. So there's like tons of women in the backyard at the mansion, and Holly, Bridget, and Kendra are sitting at a table. They're sitting with Keith, Hugh Hefner's brother, and a guy from HR, I want to say from the Palms, or like maybe he worked at the Playboy brands or something like that, but like he is there on behalf of the Playboy clubs. Mandy Bentley comes up to this table, and this is such an awkward rewatch. Before Mandy walks up, you can see Holly whispering that she sees a Bentley twin. And then Bridget is kind of like leading the conversation a little bit with like the questions that they're clearly asking the girls. Like, why do you want this job? Are you willing to move to Las Vegas for this job? Mandy Bentley says that she is willing to move if the money is right. And then there's a question of like, what are the qualities that you think a bunny should have? What are 3 qualities that you think describe you? The whole thing lands just like super awkward on camera. And none of them are like outright saying this is stiff or awkward or like I'm having a strange time speaking to this woman. And none of them are even saying like, I don't want her to work at the clubs. Keith Hefner even says something about like not judging her because he knows her. That 5th person who's there, like the guy working for the clubs or like whoever he was, he kind of makes a comment of like, do you think that she just thought she had it? Or like she was coming in acting too confident or something along those lines. So the other 4 people there who know her and like clearly know this story are being validated in this other person saying like, that was weird. When Mandy is first shown on camera, you do see her asking like, is Hugh Hefner here? Like, can I go see him or something along those lines? And like to be on this show, she had to sign a release. So I feel like she must have known that she was walking up to that table. And here's the thing, I am sure it was super awkward actually in real life for everyone involved because the people with the brand at this time and with Hugh Hefner at this time, Holly, Bridget, Kendra, Keith Hefner, and like whoever it is, this guy from the Palms, they all know the story of Sandy and Mandy Bentley. And this I think would have been in 2005, so this was like pretty close in time. So surely it is awkward for the people there because they know what happened and they know her whole story in all of this. I don't think it's awkward just because she is an ex-girlfriend. I think it is awkward because she is an ex-girlfriend whose sister, who was also dating Hugh Hefner at the time, after leaving the mansion, was involved in just a lot of criminal activity. To put it lightly, right? Now, from the perspective of Mandy Bentley, I have to imagine this was also super awkward for her. Again, if she agreed to be on camera, I have to imagine some portion of this is like her confidence. Like she is willing to show face and willing to meet these women and willing to face also Keith, the brother. But during this scene, showing up to this house, Mandy Bentley knows that these people know what happened with her sister. So was she being a little bit arrogant when she said she was willing to take this job if the money was right? Yeah, maybe. Maybe she felt really confident that she was going to be able to get it because she had this personal connection to the brand. But this to me is also kind of like a nervous response. Like no one here at this table is like acknowledging what they all know. They're saying they know her, but they're not saying explicitly what they know about her, what has happened since her time at the mansion. But also on the flip, like she must have actually wanted that job if she was willing to show up. And even saying like, if the money is right, why else would you be here, right? Like you have to be here because you want that job. You aren't willing to like show your face on this TV show and like stir up all that conversation about you and your sister and all of the crime, just for the sake of like having a little bit of FaceTime on this TV show. But it does seem like Sandy and Mandy Bentley generally stayed in the good graces of the brand, or maybe like came back into the good graces of the brand, because there is a photo from 2016 from the Midsummer Night's Dream Party of Sandy and Mandy Bentley and Brandy Roderick. This is an absolute like blast from the past photo. And 2016 was also like so far past the multiple girlfriends era, the girls next door era. I do wonder how friendly Brandy Roderick has stayed with them, because I do feel like Brandy Roderick like shows her face around the Playboy name still, but she doesn't really talk that openly about her time living at the mansion and dating Hugh Hefner. This video about Sandy and Mandy Bentley has been very highly requested. If you have any other recommendations for the Women of Playboy series, please let me know. Another recommendation that I've gotten a few times is Star Stowe. She has a really heartbreaking story. But if you have any other recommendations for women you'd like to see profiled or like dug into a little bit in this series, please let me know. I really do love doing them. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a video. All of my links are down below if you want to keep in touch on social media, anywhere else. And thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.